Welcome back to Today in Atlanta Sports. The last time you were here, we were talking about a Cleveland Cavaliers matchup. We talked a little bit about the potential Heat matchup. The Cavs game didn't start off great, but ended spectacularly with Trae Young, 32 second half points. We get in the playoffs. But the Heat series has gone about as poorly as you could have expected. Like, not only do you lose 115-91 in just blowout fashion, just not competitive, just a terrible game for pretty much all parties involved, especially Trae Young, who was held to single digits for just the second time all season. But then the next game, you kind of have a winnable game, and you get 29 points off the bench from Bogdanovich, and you still can't win. That's not great for looking down the road in the series. The Hawks have to win one of two on the road, and they have to hold court at home if they want to win this series. So my question to you, Alex, is: do you think they have any chance of doing that?
I don't know. Just to build some excuses for them, they played Cleveland and then flew straight to Miami. So game one, they looked tired, even though Nate McMillan said that, he's not going to blame it on that. And then they got a day of rest, and I thought, Trae had 9 tired. He's going to come out and attack. It's going to be different. It was different. And then down the stretch, we just couldn't stop Jimmy Butler. Trae made some bad decisions, 10 turnovers, 19 total turnovers. I don't know. I mean, there's no reason to be confident about winning both of these games. I think, winning one is a maybe. What they're showing right now gives me no confidence.
Well, I think the good news is you're going back home. A series doesn't really start until one team wins on the road. Everybody knows that. I mean, obviously the Heat could win all 4 at home and the Hawks could win all 3 at home, but I doubt that's the way that this is going to play out. The Hawks have won 20 of their last 23 at home. So you should feel confident in them coming back home. I do think that's going to be a huge deal. I think people, just because the way the Hawks have played well on the road in the past in the playoffs, and I do think they can steal one on the road. I think they showed that in game 2 of this series. People forget how big home court advantage is in these playoffs. And I think you're going to see a totally different 2 teams come out. I think the Heat role players will look a lot different. I think the Hawks role players will look a lot different. But if the Hawks are going to get this done, it really comes down to one thing. If they want to have any chance, I mean, I think it's going to be extremely difficult. I think very few teams come back from 2-0, especially when they have to win one on the road. But Trae Young has to play better. You look at 25-7, you're like, that's not too bad. Well, one, that's below Trae's season averages. And I know the Heat have a great defensive team and they've come out with a great defensive game plan, but Trae has chucked up some awful threes, just awful threes at inopportune times. And he turned the ball over 10 times yesterday. Outside of that, the Hawks, I'm looking right here, the Hawks had 8 turnovers as a team, and then Trae Young had 10. I mean, that's unacceptable. And I know the Heat are a good team, but that's just terrible basketball by your best player. We talked about Trae being the best player on the floor entering the series. He hasn't even been anywhere close. He hasn't even been a top 5 player. So I think if he becomes the best player on the floor, you're talking about a totally different series. I think that's very possible. We've seen Trae Young do it. So I'm not going to totally say, hey, this series is over. You come back home, you look different, you get some confidence. And the Hawks have shown some grit on the road in game 2. And we know they can win game. They've proven, later in series, they've won it in Philly in game 5 and game 7. So I'm not going to totally write out the team, because I think guys like DeAndre Hunter have played well in this series. We obviously saw Bogey go off, even though he didn't play well in game 1. Gallo looked good in game 1, looked awful in game 2. So, and John Collins actually looked pretty good, getting 13 and 10 yesterday. So there are some things that I'm like, I liked, but the simple fact is that if the Hawks are never going to win a game where Trae Young has 10 turnovers against the Heat. It's not, especially on the road. There's 0% chance of that happening. I don't care how good everyone else plays. So I think Trae Young has been one of the worst players in this series. He just has. And if the Hawks are going to, somehow turn this around, he's got to play a lot better. The good news is he's very capable.
Yeah, on the flip side, outside of Trae stepping it up, defense wasn't there down the stretch. I know, DeAndre Hunter was in foul trouble, Kevin Huerter, Bogey, they were all in foul trouble, and those are 3 guys guarding Jimmy Butler, so, they were less aggressive than maybe they normally would have been. But the defense has got to be there. It's got to be better, and maybe that starts with, not getting in early foul trouble with these guys. Play your game. They're playing these mind games, the Heat are, and it's working. They're being dirty and cheap, and
Yeah, I mean,
it's gotten to the Hawks.
I mean, they got home cooking with the whistle in both games. I mean, what we saw in game two is absolutely pathetic. I think that will switch when you go on the road, and that's another thing. That's a big part about home court advantage, home cooking. I mean, these refs are getting yelled at from 5 feet away by fans, and you can't tell me that doesn't have an effect on the game. It does. It does everywhere you go. It was straight home cooking. The calls were awful. They were letting the Heat foul left and right, and then they were just calling like ticky-tack fouls, letting Jimmy Butler get in the line whenever he wanted, and that's how Jimmy Butler got hot. Now, I'm not going to make excuses. The Heat deserved to win that game, but that was home cooking at the peak of home cooking is what that was in game two, and I think that will change when you go on the road to Atlanta when our fans are doing that to the refs. Another point that, yeah, I mean, defensively, this Hawks team is struggling, and it's not a surprise without Clint Capella. They can't guard the paint. Missing him is huge. So, I mean, Travis Schlenk did give an update. I mean, you saw him out on the floor. He's resuming strength exercises. Listen, I don't really think there's a chance, but hypothetically, you tie this series up 2-2. You can win your home games, and Clint Capella could get back out there for game five because you do have 2 days off, and then you're going to play 2 games in 3 days, and then you're going to have 2 more days off. So you have basically a week before Capella needs to be back out there. If you can take care of business at home and go 2-2, and Trae Young can play better, get back in his rhythm, that game five, if Capella comes back, is super, super, super interesting. So I'm not panicking yet. I mean, at the end of the day, the Heat were supposed to win this series. Like, I think everyone on ESPN picked them. They're supposed to win this series. So losing 2 games on the road, especially one being a very competitive one last night without Clint Capella, not that surprising. Not that surprising. You come back home where you won 20 of your last 23. You hold home floor, and if you can get Capella back later in the series, now the Heat are like they have to totally adjust, and they have to totally adjust on the fly. They haven't seen Clint Capella out on the floor. They're not going to be able to attack the rim like that. So very, very interesting if that scenario plays out. But you got to hold up serve at home, and in the NBA you can do that. You do it all the time. But very interesting when Capella can come back later in this series.
I'm sure the listeners are appreciative of your optimism, but I'm going to be pessimistic here. And they've just shown nothing for me to be confident. And and all the points you made were valid about home court advantage and, Trae and all these things and Clint coming back. But until, they come out in game 3 and show it, I'm tired of thinking maybe this team is something that they aren't. And, when you turn the ball over 18, 19 times against the number 1 seed, you're never going to win. So it seems like the Hawks are maybe fixing things as we go. And just like you said, the Heat were supposed to win this series, but you just like a better showing than what we've seen the first 2 games. I mean, game 2 was good until down the stretch, they just completely fell apart. But, you got to put it together for 48 minutes.
I mean, it's a 2-point game with 3 minutes left. They had a chance to win. That's about all you can ask on the road in the NBA playoffs.
Right, and they fell apart. And then they fell apart.
But hey, listen, that's the thing. You only need one. You take care of business at home, you only need one. And I think the Hawks can do it. I mean, the Hawks have been just so good at home. So I'm not going to freak out. I'm not saying I'm confident in them winning the series. I mean, that would be absurd. I would say the Hawks have probably 10% or less chance of winning the series. I'm not confident in that. But I'm not going to freak out and say, oh, this is going to be a sweep. When the Hawks looked totally competent on the road, and I think they're going to look much better at home. I mean, your best player turns the ball over 10 times, and you got a chance to win on the road. You can win at home. Play a little bit better. And I think Capella coming back later in the series, if that's possible, I think you have a chance to make this a competitive. To really, if you make it 2-2, which is very possible, and Capella is able to come back, I really think that changes things and puts a lot of pressure on the Heat, who are going to start feeling it if you lose 2 straight. I don't care if you're playing at home a lot. If they lose 2 straight and this is 2-2 and you're getting Clint Capella back, this whole series is going to look a lot different. And I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I think they can do that. They've won 20 of 23 at home. That's not a fluke.
Sure. The probability is low, but if they win this 3rd game, I'm going to immediately be back on. I'm going to immediately switch and be like, we're going to win Sunday. I get it, but it starts with game 3 and, you're bringing up all these points. We just haven't seen it. The Heat have pretty much – they haven't shut Trae down, but they are doing as good of any team to ever defend Trae. I mean, they've got it. Switching 1 through 5, pressuring, just suffocating defense.
And I agree, and that's the Heat staple. And we'll see if Trae is going to be able to adjust. I'm not going to say it's a guarantee. I have a feeling things are going to be different at home. I can't imagine Trae is going to play bad like this, as bad as he has. And it could just be a matter of, I'm not saying he needs to go off for 45 and 10, especially when the role players are going to be player on the road. He doesn't need to be Mr. Hero Ball. But, if he can get the guys involved, good decisions, not turn the ball over 10 times, I think you have a good chance of winning these games. And I just think the goal has to be, 2-2. And I really think people overreact to what happens when you play on the road in playoff series because, there was a day, and if you're not a Hawks fan for a long time, when Al Horford and those Hawks were playing, we never won a damn game on the road in the playoffs. Never. Like legitimately never. But everyone came into Atlanta and we would win. And it would be like, I remember we played the first playoff series of that whole start was in 2008 against the Celtics who won the championship. We won all 3 games at home as an 8 seed and lost all 4 on the road. And none of the games at home were close. So it's a big difference home and on the road, and the Hawks have played way better at home. It does start with game 3, and if you go down 3-0, you're fucked. But if you win game 3, you start to feel a lot better. So I'm not in panic mode. I pretty much expected there was a good chance we'd be down in this very scenario, and you go back 2-2. Capella comes back. You just got to win one on the road. So I'm not in panic mode. I'm fine. And listen, if we lose to the Heat, we lose to the number 1 seed. That was what was supposed to happen. So either way, I'm at peace with what happened. The Hawks as a team are gonna. We've talked about this a million times. They're gonna have to make changes in the offseason. It doesn't matter if they win this series or not because they're not winning an NBA championship. They got to make changes. Things just aren't clicking 100%. They got to get better. They feel like the same team as last year, and with everyone else getting better in the East, that's not good enough.
Yeah, we'll see. I think it's going to be a wild offseason for the Hawks.
Yeah, I think there'll be changes everywhere, but we don't have to worry about that until we lose game 3. If we lose game 3, we can start talking about the offseason.
Blow it up.
There's no way they're winning 4 games. But I'm not in panic mode yet. I'm not super pessimistic either. I think game 3, they're going to look a lot better. I think Trae Young's going to play better. The role players will play better. I think the Heat might struggle a little bit more offensively. I don't think you're going to see 50 from Jimmy Butler. There's a lot of things that happen in that game that might not happen in this one. So I'm not ready to wave the white flag. This is a long series. They don't call it a series for nothing. And man, dude, if Trae Young gets hot, if he figures this shit out, gets a little bit of confidence, that changes the series. That changes the series. So let's see if he can get hot and change this series. And we'll come back. We'll be back before Sunday's game if they get a dub. If not, we'll see it. We'll do a recap of the season afterwards.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go get a call. Hey, you know what that says?
Call!
That says believe. That says believe.